Hi, Garland Nixon here. There are a lot of factors that affect the conflict, and one of them is time. And we're going to talk about who will be able to take advantage of that dynamic. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here. And you may recall that Rolling Stones remake, Time is on My Side. Or you might remember the movie with Denzel Washington called Fallen, where the creature or whatever the heck it was would look at him and sing, Time is on my side. So we need to figure this out. How time affects the dynamics of the current US Russia conflict, because that's what we have to call it. This is not a Ukraine Russia conflict. There is no EU. NATO, when it comes to this conflict, the EU does not exist. NATO is simply a tool that the US empire uses. It's simply an umbrella, it's simply a little tent in which the US huddles together all of its chumps, stooges, and suckers and puppies in the who unfortunately for the European people, they believe run their countries. But the US brings the stooges together and tells them what to do. And NATO is simply the tent it uses to collect them all together, to bring the stooges together so it can give them their marching orders. So let's call it what it is. The United States is going after Russia. The United States has gone to war with Russia, and it's simply using a buffer. And NATO and Ukraine is the buffer. And then it has a bunch of stooges that it uses to sacrifice as necessary. That would be NATO and the EU, right? So let's talk about time and the factor of time. Let me, as an example, let's just start here. Let's start with this. One of the things that we hear when we read about this and NATO and their energy problems is making it through the winter. Are we going to make it through the winter? How can we make it through the winter? Well, we have, if you follow this conflict, recently, that has been the discussion for some time when it comes to the issue of energy is making it through the winter, right? Here's the issue. Let me just put it to you like this. If you think about making it through the winter from now, but let's go long term. Let's add some time to this. Let's say you're in Africa and you're running across the Serengeti plain and you're being chased by whatever. Somebody wants to kill you. They're chasing you. Get down to the river, and whoever's chasing you, they can't swim. So you're like, if I could get across the river to the other side, I'd be fine. How do I make it across the river? Right. But when you say, how do we make it through the winter, or how do I make it across the river, that implies that when you get to the other side of this, that times are going to get better, that something, but you go down, you turn around, the potential killer is chasing you, you're ready to dive in the water, and you look, and there's crocodiles. So you got to think to yourself, I stay here, this guy gets me. I jump in the water, there's crocodiles, right? That's a problem. But if I stay here, I'm surely dead. So I got to try. You jump in the water, you start swimming, you look on the other side, and there's a pack of there's a pride of hungry lions. So if you stay here, you get eaten. If you swim across, you might make it if you're lucky. But when you get to the other side, you're going to get eaten anyway, right? Because there's a pride of hungry lions. So one of the way you're done, you're toast, you're going to get it. Well, that's, I think, is the position that the EU finds itself in, because they're talking about, can we make it through the winter? What lies on the other side of the winter? Now, keep in mind, if you dive in the river to swim across and there's crocodiles, the odds of you making it across are not real high, right? So let's start here. The odds of the EU making it through the winter are not real high. So before we even get to the other side, let's talk about, and this is not discussed often, what would that look like? What does it actually look like if the if the EU, who's saying we need to make it through the winter, And everybody talks about that. Make it through the winter, make it through the winter. They're going to make it through the winter. Can we have 80% of the fuel? Can we make it through the winter? If it's not too bad a winter, we might be able to make it a bit. But what does make it through the winter look like? And if you're swimming across that river and you say, if I don't make it, what does that look like? Well, I can tell you what it looks like if you're swimming across that river. It looks like a bunch of crocodiles chomp on you, start rolling over and tear you to limb from, literally tear you limb from limb and swallow you whole. So if you stay here on this side of the river, what does it look like? That killer's going to catch me and he's going to hack me to death with a machete. Oh, that ain't good. What happens if I jump in? Worst case scenario, if I don't make it across, what does that look like? I get torn to bits by crocodiles. Okay, if I get to the other side, what's waiting there? Well, if I don't get hacked to death by the killer who's chasing me, I don't get torn to shreds by the crocodiles. When I come up on the other side of the river, the lions are going to rip me to pieces. There's a reality. You can just say, make it across the river, but there is a reality if you don't make it, how this thing ends. Okay, so let's talk about the EU. Let's say they make it through the winter. Okay, we'll talk about what that looks like when they get on the other side. Let's say they don't, because there's a discussion how we're going to make it through the winter. It implies that it's possible they don't make it through the winter. What does it look like if they don't make it through the winter? Nobody discusses that, right? If you're running and somebody says, hey, we got to try to swim across, there ain't going to be a discussion. That you got to make a decision, but you don't really want to think about it. You don't really want to think about it when you dive in the water. What does it look like if you're not successful getting to the other side? Because nobody wants to kind of picture themselves getting torn apart by crocodiles, but that's the reality you're facing. So let's talk about this. Nobody discusses it. What does not making it through the winter look like? Let's just say it's January. Ice, cold, snow, unthinkable, horrible, cold everywhere, right? And they don't make it through the winter. And in the midst of January, they wake up one day in the EU and they say, we don't have any more gas. We're out. And we're getting so little from Russia. If Russia hasn't closed off the last pipe by then, which they probably will have, but let's just say they haven't, and they got this little bit of gas that they're coming in. That ain't enough to do nothing. Let's say they heat municipal buildings. But think about this. We're talking, 500 million people or something in the EU, something like that. And they're out of energy. And they don't have, think about honestly what that looks like. They don't have food. They don't have heat to heat their homes. Now, what happens to buildings? What happens to homes when they don't have heat and it's far below freezing? Pipes burst everywhere. Pipes bursting, infrastructure bursting, things bursting everywhere. Number one. Number two, the electrical plants, they're going to have rolling blackouts. That's coming. What does that mean? That means you won't have heat. You won't have electricity for periods of time. Now, it's bad enough if you live in the country and you don't have that. But you know what? If you live out in the country somewhere, if you live out in a rural area somewhere, if you live out on a farm, you can burn wood and have a fire. But that ain't a lot of Europe. You're in Paris, you're in Berlin, you're in Munich, you're in these cities, London, with millions of people. And that city goes dark. And that city goes cold. And then they say, look, we're going to have rolling blackouts. We're going to have electricity 12 hours a day, and we're going to have no electricity for 12 hours a day. And they decide, well, we'll go at night, and you can only turn on certain things. No electricity. What if there's on for 4 hours, off for 4 hours, on for 4 hours, and it's blistering cold? Pipes are going to burst. Infrastructure is going to be screwed up. Now, at that point, can people drive around? You don't have gas. The gas stations aren't on. You don't have energy. You're running out of fuel. Now, you don't, let's say you don't have oil. Because remember, the EU said in a certain date, December 15th or whatever, they're going to stop buying oil from Russia. So now people are like, I'll go to the gas station. You can't go to the gas station. The gas station's out of oil. You can't heat your house. So they're talking about making it through the winter, but they're not talking to the European citizens, letting them know, A, the odds of us making it through the winter ain't good, infinitesimally small. And if we don't, which now is the probability, it is a human disaster of biblical proportions. Hundreds of millions of people without electricity, without heat. The death toll. Think about this. You have people who, in order to live, they've got health problems. They've got to have oxygen. They've got to have certain types of medicine. How do you move medicine around and get all your medicine to the places where, whether it's a hospital, what happens in the hospitals? You got people in the hospitals who are really, really sick. Who've got to be on machines, intensive care. How do you keep that going when now you're running out of fuel and energy? So you have rolling blackouts in a hospital. You have the hospital has generators, but you can't get gas or kerosene or gasoline or whatever, petrol as you call it, whatever. You're now looking at hospitals not working. They have talked about hospitals having warming rooms so they can bring everybody in the hospital because they can only heat one room. You can't do that. You got people who, if you try to do that, they're dead. They will not survive. What happens when you have people in surgery and they don't have the things that they need properly? Not only that, when you have snow, you've got to have snow plows to move it. You've got to have certain infrastructure to clear the snow, things like that. You don't have that because you're short of energy. And so you can't clear things. You're talking, if they don't make it, which seems like maybe even a probability now, and it could be worse, you're talking about a potential collapse of your social and economic structure. Collapse that would make you wish you were in a third world country. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I'm saying the potential is there, and the potential is greater than a remote possibility. I would say the potential at this point, because of two reasons. Number one, because the actions that the leaders are taking is actually going in that direction. They're moving in that direction. Number one. And number two, because of the level of incompetence of the leaders. They're living in a narrative. They're living in the matrix. Their whole thing is about a narrative. How can you spin a story? You can't heat your home with a spun story. You can't heat your home with, yay, did you see the Ukrainians had an offensive? Face it, the offensive in Ukraine was all about taking an action that will be extremely costly. God only knows what the unthinkable number of people that they lost. But why'd they do it? They did that. I'm not saying this is the only reason, but I think this is a big part of it, was so they can say to the European people, look, hold on, continue to hold on. We're winning. See, we told you this thing would come around. We're going to win. And so a big part of this move that wiped out, God knows, tens of thousands of people killed and injured for Ukraine alone, was part of that was a propaganda move. That was, we've got to try to get the people who are like saying, hey, we got a problem, we might not have food and warmth, we've got to get them to back on board. But look, they ain't staying on board. They're on board now, but trust me, it's getting cold. They aren't staying on board, and certain people already know. Let's look here. Let's start with let's start with a couple of articles. EU about to face reality on Russia sanctions. Hungary. The EU will review sanctions on Russia and could lift some of them as soon as this autumn. Hungarian State Secretary for Foreign Affairs and Trade Tamás Menczer said. Right, and he goes on. He says, reality knocks on the door of every country. Menczer said, explaining why he believes the sanctions will be lifted sooner rather than later. Member states are set to review their sanctions policies in the autumn. The European Commission has reportedly backpedaled on the gas price cap and is currently working on a mechanism to tax the windfall profits of energy companies. Brussels is also urging EU nations to impose various energy-saving measures to better prepare for peak consumption during the winter. It ain't going to do them no good, especially if they keep pissing Russia off and Russia just slams the door on them and says, okay, I've had enough. Let me show you something. This isn't what I'm looking for. Oh, look at this. Moscow unveils details of a new gas pipeline to China. What's that all about? Russia is turning east. The time's going to come. See, you assume it's like a guy who mistreats his girlfriend and mistreats her, and then he comes back and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, please take me back." She takes him back, and he mistreats her and mistreats her. And one of these days, he says to her, "I'm sorry, please take me back," and she says, "I'm sorry, not this time. You've gone one time too many." So Gazprom is finalizing construction deals of the Soyuz Vostok gas pipeline project with a Chinese and Mongolian partner. For this year, we predict 20% growth of energy transfers from Russia to your country, dear friends, up to 5.2 billion kilowatts. Designed to carry natural gas to China via Mongolia, the Soyuz pipeline is part of the larger Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. It will able to bring up to 50 billion cubic meters of gas to China annually. Do you see what Russia's doing? They're getting the hell out of Europe. So Europe is like playing this game, thinking that, well, if times get hard, we'll just call Russia and say, let's make a deal, and you can turn on, Nord Stream 1, 2, whatever the hell, right? But Russia, I mean, that girlfriend's out looking out at the singles bar trying to find a new guy. And this guy calls back and he says, I'm sorry, will you take me back again, honey? And she says, I can't talk to you. I'm on a date. What? Yeah. Well, remember the last time we broke up? Yeah, that dog ain't hunting around here no more. It's over. I moved on, right? So what Russia is doing is simply what any business would do. If you're responsible and you have a business, what do? When you see an irresponsible business partner, you say, I got to find a new partner. I got to sell enough to make a living. But this partner ain't getting it done. So they're going to get this pipeline up and going. And I tell you what the hell's going to happen. Russia has contracts with European countries, and the contracts, for the most part, is to provide them with gas at a set price. And they'll set a price, and they may go with that price for 5 years. So if you're one of those people that have a set price, you're still paying what you were paying a year ago, and everybody else is paying 800 times that much. I mean, I'm being facetious, but you get the point. That's the power of those long-term contracts, and that's what Russia wants. RMR, recurring monthly revenue, as they say in the business industry, right? But however often they pay, what they want to say is this: we got a long-term contract. Even though we won't make as much, we'll make plenty, and we'll keep our business going. Other than that, Russia sells it to the general market. It goes to the spot market, and the price goes up and down. Russia makes a lot more money, right? I think what's going to happen is the Europeans, number one, are just at some point they'll be driven to a point where they'll say, look, we got to get gas. What do we need to do? Now, what happens if Russia says we don't need to do nothing? What are you talking about? Well, we want to get back, and Russia will probably say, "Sure, drop all the sanctions, and then we will not sign a new contract with you, but we'll continue to fulfill this contract." But at some point, this contract's going to be up, and they're going to call Russia and say, "We want to renew our contract." And I suspect Russia's going to say, "Sorry, we don't have no gas for you. We've reoriented our gas towards China. So best of luck. You've got the United States over there that'll sell you liquefied natural gas for 10 times the price. I think you should do with them. Remember, we're the evil Ruskies, and we use gas as a weapon. You wouldn't want to buy gas from us. Move on, shove off, take a hike. Don't let the doorknob hit you where the good Lord split you, as they say, right? We're out. At some point, they're going to be out. So the EU is acting as though they can always go back to Russia and get it. At some point, Russia's going to be like, screw you, I'm out. And I think that's what we're looking at. So time is not on the EU side. They are, and they're creating a dynamic wherein the Russians are going to be like, you hate us. Why should we do business with people that hate us? And number one. And number two, why should we sign a new contract? The last time we signed a contract with you, you screwed over us and you stole our money. Let's start there. We got $100 billion or whatever in accounts, and you stole them, and you won't give it back to us. And you said we're never getting it back. Well, you ain't getting no more oil contracts. You're out of luck. Go buy them from you and the people. Take that $100 billion you stole from us and use that to buy oil, because you ain't getting it from us. At some point, that's what Russia's doing. They're moving to new customers so they can completely cut off the Europe. And basically, if Europe wants it, they're not getting contracts. They're going to have to buy it at full price on the spot market. I suspect that's what Russia's going to do. And if Russia would enter into a new contract, I guarantee you there would be something written in that contract that said, if there are any sanctions whatsoever against us that are not approved by the whatever, but just write it, any sanctions, and all contracts are null and void. That's what you're going to see next. If they get any more contracts with Russia, they're going to say any sanctions, all contracts are null and void. Because let's not forget, Russia didn't ask for Nord Stream 2. Germany went to Russia and said, we want to do Nord Stream 2. Russia didn't ask for it. And then Nord Stream 2 was built, and the US came in and put the fritz on it. So I suspect in the long run, number one, Europe has taken their best partner for commodities and destroyed that relationship, and it's not ever going to be fixed, and they're never going to get the kind of prices that they got before. Now let's go also talk about what is going on as far as regime change. Let's look at this. Remember, Putin must not, this man must not stay in power. That was Joe Biden. Let's look over here. All right. Right-wing bloc wins Swedish election. A coalition led by Ulf Kristersson has narrowly won a majority. Let's look at this. Italy's right heads for clear election victory, final polls indicate. You know, here's the reality. The people who are in charge in Europe are not looking out for the people who, their constituents, and there will be regime change. None of these governments are going to stay. Schultz, none of them are going to stand. When a winter starts, none of them are going to stand. They can't possibly stand. They'll all be wiped out. They will be lucky. These governments, once times get really bad in the winter, these governments will be very fortunate if they're voted out of office. If they're not fortunate, they'll be removed from office physically by screaming, hungry, freezing crowds. And I don't think that's going to turn out in a way that any of them will be happy with. But there will be regime change of various forms throughout Europe. No question about that. All right, and now so that's obvious. Let's talk about again time. So I talked about a few minutes ago the discussion in Europe, hey, we're going to make it through the winter. Now, again, as we said, if they don't make it through the winter, that means that you're looking at catastrophe. You're looking at human catastrophe. You're looking at what the US and NATO did to Yemen and Libya 1,000 times over. You're looking at 500 million people stuck, out of luck, out of food, out of energy, out of electricity, out of petrol, out of time, out of patience. You're talking about a lot of deaths. And particularly, you know, what always happens, this is one unfortunate, when things like this get difficult, who's going to die? The most vulnerable. Seniors are not going to be able to take that cold. So you'll have seniors who die from the small children, probably, who die from the elements. Then of course, crime's going to go through the roof as people get desperate. It's already started. So crime will go through the roof. In Europe, you're going to see we're already seeing it increasing of prostitution. We're seeing an increase of organized crime. Then, okay, they brought Ukraine, which was the poorest and most corrupt country in the U.S. They brought those to the West. You don't think that the organized crime in Ukraine is coming to the other areas? They're going to bring their prostitution and drugs and all the things they do and corruption. You've brought a bunch of people like that out into France and Spain. Look, organized crime and corruption thrives in hard times. So now people are going to be in bad shape, terrible, struggling. They're going to sell more drugs. They're going to need more prostitutes. They're going to, all the bad things that are going to happen. The criminal element will thrive and get powerful. So now let me add this. Europe's known for being clean. When you have a city who barely has food and electricity, can you afford to have people going around sweeping the streets and cleaning things up? Can you afford to use that energy on trucks going around vacuuming the streets? Europe is going to turn into a filthy, filthy mess. You're going to have people who can't afford houses, you know, and you're in a house, but you don't have electricity or heat. I mean, just imagine what we're talking about here. Think about this now. We're talking about, let's say, a swath of Germany that's heavily populated, right? Hundreds of thousands, millions and millions of people. So you go through these towns and cities, et cetera, and you find millions of people. Now, all of a sudden, that entire area is out of electricity for X amount of hours a day. That entire in the middle of winter, they got snow on the ground, they got ice storms going on, they got unthinkable weather. Guess what? You're gonna have to close schools. You're gonna have to close schools because people are about surviving. So you're not going to be able to have colleges. You're not going to be able to have grade school. You're not going to be able to go to work because they're going to have to close the factories and everything. So now you'll have the equivalent of what they did in COVID, the equivalent of lockdowns, and they won't have to have real lockdowns because people won't be able to afford to do anything. And they won't have energy. They'll try to, I mean, basically what you're going to do is you're going to turn the knob of your society down almost to zero, in the same way, metaphorically, in the same way that you're going to go, that people who, God knows if they're lucky enough to have heat in their house, they're going to have to turn it down. They're saying like 66. So you're going to have to turn it down to 66, and it's going to go lower than that before it's all done, right? That's what they're going to do to their entire society. They're going to look at it and they're going to say, we don't have enough energy. Let's turn it down. And they're going to turn it down, 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 down. Meanwhile, let me add this. The Ukrainian conflict is still going to be going on. And I suspect, look, we had this incident recently where the West trumpeted, oh, look what we've done. But what did they really do? They took some areas where the Russians didn't have, they didn't leave enough people to guard the area. So when the Ukrainians came, the Russians evacuated, fell back from some areas. And so the Ukrainians took some areas where the Russians had well defended it. Excuse me, the Russians got embarrassed, but they didn't lose a lot of people. Meanwhile, Ukrainians made a couple of attacks, and my understanding is they lost upwards of 10 to 12,000 KIA, which means anywhere from 2 to 5 for injured for every death. A lot of deaths, a lot of injured, a lot of soldiers out. So as the U.S. and its vassals are trying to make it through as they're trying, basically here's what's happening. The EU is going to be trying to survive. The U.S. is going to be trying to hold the EU in line, even if they don't survive. They're going to say, we don't care if you're starving or dying. We don't care how bad it gets for you. You just continue to do what the hell we want because you're all dispensable anyway. So at the same time, this is something that I think will happen. At the same time that Europe is falling to bloody hell, right? That they're running out of energy, etc. They're going to realize that it was all for naught because the whole Ukraine conflict is going to be falling apart on them. The Russians are very, very patient. I think they're going to continue to do what they're doing. And they've surrounded Bakhmut. And I suspect that they haven't surrounded it, but they're in the process of slowly enveloping Bakhmut. And you'll have a bunch of soldiers there that are surrounded. And that's one of the main headquarters and most important strategic locations for the Ukraine military. So they lose Bakhmut, and there's a good likelihood that will be kind of really the loss of Donbass. So all of this is going, and I suspect that once the eastern Ukraine drops, the Russians can charge. They can move on to other things. So while the Europeans are losing their lifestyle, are losing their society, are losing their culture, are losing everything that they've held dear for centuries, the U.S. is going to be losing the war in Ukraine. It's inevitable now. I think one of the things that it's always been inevitable. I think one of the things that happened was, they got a short-term success, right? Yay, we took some, the Russians evacuated some areas and we took those areas. However, now they burned their reserves. So you're losing 12,000 KIA. That's probably maybe 30,000 conservative, 20 to 30,000. So let's go with 30,000 dead. 30,000 wounded. You're 40,000 people. It wouldn't surprise me between killed and wounded if there was 30,000 or more. There's high numbers of KIA and wounded. So that means it's going to be very much more difficult pulling forward for the Ukraine to muster the reserves it needs to to defend area, to launch counteroffensives, etc. A lot of times, and I did a video long ago where I used the term collapse. And I said, I believe at some point this thing collapses. I've said that, you can probably find a video if you look way back, and you'll probably find in the name, the word will be in the video, the name collapse will be there. So I believe that at some point, this thing in Ukraine collapses, the Ukrainian military, the Ukrainian project. And let me add this. How does Ukraine fight a war, stay warm, keep people fed in the winter? How do they do that? How does Ukraine pull that off? How does Poland pull it off? They've got Ukrainian refugees by the millions. How do they feed and take care of the Ukrainian refugees? Poland's not a rich country. It's kind of a poor country. So how does Poland do that? How do these other countries, these other Baltic countries, these other countries that are facing 20 and 22%, UK 22%, they're expecting 22% inflation. How do they hang on? And here you've got people suffering, trying to hang on. The only thing you've got to feed them is propaganda, and they're looking over there, and Ukraine's losing the war, and they lose everything. They lose their lifestyle, they lose their job, they lose their expectation of a reasonable standard of living, and they've been told it's all for Ukraine, and that's fault going to hell. They ain't gonna be happy. You heard me say that. They're not going to be happy. Time is not on the side of the people who are orchestrating this. So I suspect what happens is you're looking at a regime change throughout the EU. You're looking at incredible pressure on leaders of the EU to a point where it'll be irresistible, where the pressure, there could be violence. There could literally be violence against leaders. There could be deadly violence against politicians. It wouldn't surprise me. I oppose violence. I don't want to see it, but it wouldn't shock me if there's deadly violence. And we'll be looking at a winter where there is what was a developed industrial society that's existing as a impoverished third world dystopian hellscape. I don't see how that works out. I don't see how you come out of the winter with much of anything left of Europe. People will find something to burn to keep warm. Yeah, they'll find something to burn to keep warm. All right, the entire cities. This is gonna. What are you gonna do? And I didn't get to one more thing. So this is the last thing I'll hit. We've talked about regime change. We've talked about making it through the winter versus not making it through the winter. What does that look like? But let's keep going just a little bit. What does the spring look like? If you make it through the winter, what does the spring look like? Yay, the winter's over. Now what do? Our factories have closed, so people don't have jobs. Now, another thing they're going to have issues with, fertilizer. So are we going to have enough food? Meanwhile, over the course of the summer, because they're supposedly cutting off Russian gas, all this other stuff, caps, blah, 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 they're going to just simply create artificial scarcity, and it ain't artificial. They're going to try to get around what the market is actually doing. There will be scarcity, and the scarcity will drive the price up, but they want to try to keep the price down. Well, it's not keeping the price down is not going to do anything about the scarcity. Whatever the price is, if I can't get oil, if I can't get gas, if I can't get the product, I can manipulate the price, but I still don't have the product. Well, and even worse, what happens if they say, here's what we're going to do to make it easier for people, everybody, we're going to say, we've got a cap on gas, 2 cents per gallon, 2 cents per cubic meter of natural gas, whatever. They make it dirt cheap. The government will pay the rest. Well, that ain't going to do you no good because you're not going to have any. It's not going to be about the price. It's going to be about whether you actually have the commodity. It doesn't matter what the price is if you can't actually get the commodity. Their problem is not going to be the price. Their problem is going to be actually getting the commodity. They're talking about how do we deal with caps and the price and this and that. That ain't going to do you no good. If you're on a desert island and you got $1 million in cash, burn it to cook your food. It ain't going to do you no good. There's nothing to buy. There's no stores. You're stuck on a desert island. That's where they're going to be. And they're talking about the price now. That's the price isn't going to be their problem. And then, if they make it through, We talked about that term. Okay, the spring's here. The people are going to expect some respite, but there's going to be food scarcities even worse because there's shortage of a fertilizer. Now, the spring hits and people have been through hell. They've been through a time that makes COVID look like it was, the Oktoberfest. Spring gets here and they're like, well, in Germany, we had to close all of our factories down. I guess they'll be opening them up back now, right now, huh? And the government's going to say, we still don't have any energy. And if we did, we don't have the market. If we get energy, it's going to be so expensive. Whatever you're making at BASF, what you're making at Siemens, what you're making at Bosch, what you're making at Mercedes, what you're making at Porsche, all these companies that we have, even if we get the fuel, it's going to be so expensive that the refrigerators that you make at Bosch, even though they're high-end refrigerators, they won't be able to compete with higher-end refrigerators from other parts of the world because our gas is going to be so high. We'll have to, just to break even, charge twice as much as they do for the refrigerators. So Germany will no longer be industrially competitive in the industrial market. So what happens? The people are going to say, okay, we're ready to go back to work. We, quote, made it through the winter, which they won't. And the government's going to say, nah, we realistically, these factories can't open back up because we got through the winter, which they won't. But we still don't have the fuel. And what fuel we're getting is so expensive that the factories that you work in can't afford to put out product because it costs too much. And so now they're going to be like, well, winter's over. I've got a family. I got kids. I got this and that. I got a mortgage. I got a car. I got all these things. What do I do? And the government's going to be, yeah, that's a good question. Here's what you do. You face the fact that you live in a third world country right now, and those things that you used to enjoy, you don't get them. People are going to say, when? Never. It's over. The game's over. The living in a country where you had internet and you had a car and you had meat and or fish or whatever it was that you wanted to eat and things of that nature, yeah, those days are over. That's not the country you live in. That's not the continent you're on anymore. We made decisions. It didn't have to be this way, but we made decisions based on politics that it was more important to try to keep the United States as the world hegemon than it was to maintain your standard of living. And bad news, the United States ain't the world hegemon anyway. So for all of the things we did, how in the hell? Here's the next question. How in the hell are Europeans going to survive when they're looking on TV and the Russians are like in hot baths? The Russians are like, hey, sure is toasty in Moscow. They're like pictures of Russians and they're like bubble baths and they're scrubbing and they're splashing water, and they're just like, hey, honey, turn the heat down. I'm burning up in here. Well, I'm turning it up. Open the windows. So they'll open the windows and they'll blast the heat. And the people in Europe are living like Neanderthal times. How you live with that? And how does the government at that point look at them and say, you're doing the right thing? We're getting Russia. But the Russians have plenty of food and they're warm. And we don't have any either. And our society's collapsing, and they're like at the Bolshoi Ballet. It's like Saturday night. What's going on in Moscow? Well, you can go to the ballet. There's some nice bars open. Would you like to go to the bar? We can go watch a movie. What would you like to do? I don't know. And if you're in Munich, it's Saturday night. What do? Shiver. Shiver. You're hungry, you shiver, and you wish you had some food. You know what you do? You wish you were in Moscow, because if we're in Moscow, you'd have food and you'd be warm. If you're rich, you know what they're going to do? They're getting the hell out of there. The rich people are out of there. See, that's why the people in charge don't care. If you're rich, if you're okay, you don't have to be rich, but you can afford to get the hell out of that hellhole. If you can afford it, you're gone. If you're a in Europe, if you're a let's say you're a doctor, let's say you're a surgeon or whatever, some kind of a skill that transfers. You're like, I'm going to the US. I'm going to wherever. I'm going to another part of the world. I'm going somewhere where it's warm. I'm out of here. You have a skill that transfers. You'll get brain drain. People who can afford it will get the hell out. And the people who will be left will be the working class. And they'll be, hoping they don't get eaten by each other. So Europe falls apart. At the same time, Russia will be doing I ain't saying it perfect, but they'll be doing much, much better. They'll have the basic needs for life. And then you get to warm weather and there's no respite. There's nowhere to go. See, people are like, it's, oh, well, the nature of human beings is to think everything happens and then something and then something and then something, and it's going to get better. So they're going to be, whew, thank God the winter's over. Now we can go back to work. We can make money. We can do all of this. You ain't doing none of that. Nothing's open and you still don't have energy. It's just not cold anymore. You do not have the commodities that you had before. The only difference is it ain't cold anymore, but you still don't have it. So you didn't have energy and it was cold. Well, it's May now. Yeah, it ain't so cold, but we still don't have energy, which means you're not open the factories back up, which means you're still going to have rolling blackouts. Nothing's going to change. And the leaders aren't going to have any answers for that. Well, what's your answers? We got to hold on for Ukraine. Yeah, but Ukraine lost the war 6 months ago. Yeah, but sooner or later, things are going to come around. And when they do, we're going to be right. Yeah, no. So this recent, kind of end things up, this recent offensive by Ukraine, and a lot of people who are like Russian or rooting for Russia, whatever you want to call it, a lot of them are like, look, I'm upset. How come Russia's not going into full everything mode? How come they're not sending everything they're got? How come they ain't calling out the dogs? How come they did? Because the reality is, I think, I'm just guessing, the people in Moscow understand time's on their side. If I were the emperor of Russia and this happened and they said, what do you do, Garland? I'd say, let's review what happened. And when I looked at it, and I'm like, well, there were some areas where there weren't well defended. Ukraine sent a lot of troops, and we had to run out. We had to leave. We had to head out the back door because we didn't have enough troops to defend these towns and cities. I'd say, here's what we're going to need to do. We need to bring more reserves in. When we take ground, we need to be set better to defend it. And we need to be set better for these kinds of attacks. Number one. Number two, I'm not doing anything different. We were winning. Everything was working. We're going to set up for these types of offensives, and we're going to maintain course and speed because time, this is what I'd say, because time is on our side within the next 3 to 4 months. And in fact, I'd say we ain't speeding nothing up. We do not. If I was in charge of, I'm just saying, strategically speaking, if they said to me, what do you do? I'd say I ain't speeding anything up. I'm not speeding anything up. The faster this happens, the happier Europe will be. They want something to happen so they can find some way out. I ain't giving it to them. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to move nice and slow and say, let's take our time. And if it starts getting close to the winter, dig in somewhat, rain some artillery on the other side, do whatever you're going to do. You've got air superiority bomb and stuff like that. But if I'm Russia, I'm not in a hurry to get this over. I will, if I can, if I see the opportunity. But one of my weapons, I got 2 weapons that aren't on the battlefield. One of them is a clock, right? The other one is General Winter. So I got the clock and I got the weather. If somebody's attacks you, you got to look around. What other kind of weapons do you have? For instance, if somebody attacks you, you scream. One of the reasons that people scream out when they in self-defense when they hit, of course, it's to exhale air so you'll have more power. But when you yell, other people can hear. So if somebody's attacking me and I yell, yeah, and I strike or whatever, right? Whatever. I yell out. One of the things you teach women, I used to teach, believe it or not, back in my law enforcement days, I used to teach a personal security course where I go out to people and teach people this is how you make sure you're secure. And one of the things that you teach, criminals hate water. They're like vampires. You know what I mean? They hate light, they hate noise, they hate things that bring attention to them, right? And I would teach people, a woman, a whistle. Some guy's trying to grab you, start blowing that whistle. Put the whistle in your mouth. You're walking down the street. Noise. Guy's trying to nab you, blow the whistle. Noise. People don't, criminals don't like noise. They don't like something that brings attention to them. That's something to keep in mind. So the bottom line is, at any rate, I've been all over the place here. I'm not going to be on much longer. But I just do want to say this, that ultimately, I think that Russia's going to kind of ride this thing out. And they're going to take their time and they're going to see what happens. Watch And let me get back to what I was saying about the whistle. In a way, couldn't you argue that effectively, if you use a whistle to defeat your enemy's going to attack you. You're a woman, you blow a whistle, he hears the noise, he thinks people are coming, and he takes off. Then, to some extent, isn't that whistle an effective weapon? It's not. You didn't hit him with it, but it was a weapon. It was something you used to thwart this crime, thwart this attack. It was an effective weapon, right? If you're in a confrontation, time may be on your side. If you and I are fighting, we're toe to toe, and there's nowhere to go. If I'm in better physical condition than you, if I can last longer than you, that is a weapon. That's an advantage that I have. It's in a weapon, and I can utilize that. If I'm quicker than you, or if I'm stronger than you, or whatever it is, or if I'm better trained than you are, all of these things are weapons. We think of a weapon in hand, but all of these other things are weapons you can use to overcome your adversary, right? Okay. The same way, if you're Russia and your adversary needs energy and you have that energy, then winter is a weapon. If you can go continue this war for a long, long time because you have the military industrial capacity to do it, and it's on your border, and you have the wherewithal to continue doing this, then time is on your side. And when you factor everything together, that your adversary needs something that you provide, and overall, you can continue to prosecute this war and win it, then you have enough weapons that you're in pretty good shape. You're still in pretty good shape. So I don't see the latest offensive as some kind of a game changer. And as I said, in fact, I think that the Ukrainians, run by the US, have put themselves in a bad position because they depleted a lot of their reserves. I think they depleted a lot of their reserve forces, and they're going to pay a price for that over the upcoming, right now. I suspect Russia's looking at the weak areas, well, they lost reserves. Where did they lose them? Are there some weak spots to hit? I look for probably some Russian counteroffensive, things of that nature. But whatever the case, they don't have to. They can continue to take the time with what they're doing. They can continue to work on encircling Bakhmut and go from there, because every day that goes by, every week that goes by, every month that goes by, it gets a little bit chillier. And the EU needs the energy a little bit more. All right, let me look here. And we got some, I'm going to look on Rockfin, and we're going to look here. Okay, the Iceman Vamp says, Vladimir Nixon is back. Go Vladimir Nixon, huh? All right. And let me see, is there any? Oh, we got another super chat. Mariah M says, why are European leaders going along with this? Did the U.S. help place these people in power? Yes. Are they compromised by U.S. intelligence agencies? Yes, 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 yes. And here's the other part. This is more important. You have to understand something. They know something that you don't know. The European leaders know that they are not leaders of a country, that they are governors, that they are viceroys. When the Brits would take India or whatever country they take, and they say it's now ours, they put a governor or a viceroy. They put somebody in charge of it, right? That's all the leaders of Europe are. Their governors are viceroys. The U.S. empire has allowed them to be in charge, and said, basically, if you don't do what we want our bidding, then by our grace, you will no longer be in charge. So yeah, they know something. They're going along with it because, unfortunately, the people of England were living with the illusion that they had. They were living with the illusion that they had independence and sovereignty, and they had leaders of their country. And now they're finding out the hard way that was an illusion all the time, all along, and that all they really have is vassals as governors and viceroys. So yeah, that's what it's all about. The reality. They know it, and they're not hiding it. They're not bothering to hide it anymore. Let's look. Are there more super chats? There's got to be no more super chats, huh? Let me see at the bottom. Keep looking, because I don't want to miss somebody who does a super chat. Ms. Joan of the Ark. Thanks a lot, Ms. Joan of the Ark. Now over here, Jim Garrison, Garland says, Garland Nixon nails it. Thanks a lot, Jim Garrison. I really, really, really appreciate that. So that's the bottom line. And I'm on the way out. You know what I got to say? My spiel. Everything is going across. If you could help me out on anything to help keep the channel rolling, to support the channel, patreon.com/Garland Nixon. All the stuff's going across constantly. Buy me a coffee. A lot of people do that. I appreciate. Buy me a coffee /Garland NH. You can do it one time on that. Certainly Cash App. and that is # DC Radio Man. And of course, you can always do PayPal, and my email is there, garlandin@gmail.com. Everybody smash number one, smash the like button, smash the like button, smash the like button. We got 313 people, so I'm hoping 313 likes. Also, please, everybody, make sure that you join my Rockfin. You go to my Rockfin, you can become, and I always forget which is a member, which is a subscriber, but I'll put it like this. One of them is free, and you can see 95% of everything that I have there, no cost. $9.99 a month for those that can do it. I really appreciate that. And what you'll see for that is my Wednesday morning show with, I do a premium show, and if you pay $9.99, you'll do a weekly premium show. Mine is every Wednesday morning at 9. I have Scott Ritter on, and we do a weekly update, 9 o'clock on Wednesday mornings. If you're a premium member, you can see that. And on Rockfin is great. There's lots of other really good shows. Slow News Day, Jason Bermas, everybody's on there. But that $9.99 a month allows you to see any of the creators on Rockfin, any of their premium stuff. So it's nice, but if you can't afford it, that's fine. You're not going to miss a lot. But hey, that Wednesday morning show with Scott Ritter is really awesome. So that alone is worth it. At any rate, for $9.99 a month, come on, and helping the channel. So I certainly appreciate that. rockfin.com/Garland Nixon. You got to go over there and become either a subscriber or a member, because they might toss me off on YouTube, and we'll be ready. Let me answer a couple other people. Let me see what we have. Devil demons want us dead because they want to get our soul energy. Well, that's interesting. No sacrifices, energy to devil demons. Well, we got a lot of devil demon stuff going on here, huh? Not much talk about Eurogroup. I bet they're second in command to USA. Yeah, well, they're part of the monster and the WEF and all of that stuff, right? Let's see what else we got here. I tell the guy, you're going to have to kill me here because I ain't getting in your car. Call his bluff. Well, one of the things that it's interesting you say that, because I will comment on that, because as I said, my law enforcement career, extensive law enforcement career, and I taught personal safety. And one of the things I taught people is never, ever, ever you're exactly right. When you say you're going to have to kill me here because I ain't getting in your car, never get in the car. That's the right thing to say. Somebody's trying to grab you and drag you in a car, because if you allow them to take you to another location, the odds of you surviving it are just about zero. So if somebody tries to kidnap you, fight them for all you're worth. If they have a gun, you're going to have to kill me now, because if you take me somewhere else, I'm dead. So I'm going to make my stand here, because they're much less likely. They don't want to kill you there because there's people there and there's noise and they got a gun and they're likely to get caught. And oftentimes when somebody fights them, or it's somebody trying to kidnap a person, they'll let go. But the bottom line is, shoot, could you lose your life? Yeah. But if you let them take you in another spot, you're a goner. So that's one of the things we teach. We taught when I was teaching this stuff. Don't let people take you to kidnap you, take you to another spot. Okay. I don't know how the hell we got into that. Let's see. Text me, Ms. Joan. All right. Let's see what we got. Not much talk about. We already did that. What am I doing? Anything else? Are you going to get George Webb on your show? Oh, I could. I met George Webb before. I like George Webb. Best suggestions this chat for heat burn Ukrainian flags. Yeah, or you know what? Or you can boil them and make a nice, delicious blue and yellow soup. That's what they're going to have to do. But sadly, here, let me say something about that. We laugh and joke about this, but sadly, I feel really sorry for the people of Europe, and even the poor suckers, flag-waving idiots and sheeples. Why is that? Because they have been propagandized. They're victims of propaganda. A lot of people, if they knew the truth, that are like, yay, Ukraine, we got to stand for Ukraine. But they're doing that because they've been so lied to and propagandized. There are a lot of them are good people that if they knew the truth, they would act otherwise. But they don't know the truth. They've been lied to by their government. And there are a lot of people that don't even know what's coming. They have no idea. Their government has hid from them. Their government's been like, yeah, we're going to make it. We're going to be fine. Oh, we'll be okay. Don't worry about it. We'll find a way, right? We'll cap Russian gas. We'll do this, this, and that. And people are like, yeah, my government's got it under control. And they're going to wake up one day. They're going to be like, hey, how come the heat ain't coming on? Or the lights? Let me check with the government. Hey, my phone's not working. And then they're going to wake up and say, perhaps I've been lied to. And the idiots and stooges and Russian bots like us that tried to warn them, what are we going to? We'll do our best to help them even then. Let's see. Propaganda has Americans supporting Nazis. All right. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. I certainly appreciated everybody. All the people who don't forget, there's a number of ways financially you can help the channel. And I appreciate anyone who's able to do that. I'm going to have a good old time. I will be back. You know me. I'll be back sometimes. So tomorrow's my busy day. I've got to do a show on Radio Sputnik tomorrow, and I've got to do my show in Pacifica. You know, the funny thing about it, Friday is the day that I'm going against myself in Washington, D.C., because I record my Sputnik show, which airs on terrestrial radio in Washington, D.C. every day for 2 hours. But on um, Friday, I do my show during the day. I record it, and it airs between 6 and 8 p.m. But I am also on Pacifica live between 6 and 8 p.m. So between 6 and 8 p.m. in Washington, D.C., you could switch between two channels, and I'll be on both of them. How about that? How weird is that? But, you know, it is what it is. Thanks a lot, everybody. I'm out of here. I'm tired and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And I've really enjoyed spending a little, my God, 55 minutes with you. Has it been that long? Peace. I am out.